I would like to start with this webinar today about the multidimensional insecurities in Yemen and Libya. I will go through the agenda. We will first address the status of women in Yemen, and then continue with the women, peace and security agenda in Yemen, how it's the current status, any new developments and updates. We will also go through women at the negotiations table in Yemen and any updates on women's inclusion in the peace process. We will also address the challenges that civil society in Yemen is currently facing. Then we will move to Libya. We will go through the work of Together We Build It organization, or معا نبنيها in Libya. Our distinguished speaker will also go through the local consultations that معا نبنيها organization has conducted in Libya with the support of WILPF. And we will go through the key findings of these consultations at the grassroots level. What we think the takeaways from this webinar will be are first, an in-depth gendered analysis on the situation of women in Yemen and the challenges of civil society. The reason why we have both Yemen and Libya during this webinar is because we have supported our partner organizations in both of these countries to conduct consultations. We found a lot of similarities, unfortunately very challenging similarities for women at the grassroots level. So we decided to address these common challenges in an analysis or study that will be made available during the upcoming days online. And this is why we are holding this webinar, merging the perspectives from both Libya and Yemen. Another takeaway we think you will have is a profound explanation on the local consultations that I mentioned with women in Libya and the key findings from these. And finally, a very special occasion to have a discussion with civil society leaders from Yemen and Libya. So let me first give the floor without any further delay to Rasha Jarhum, who is a Yemeni social researcher and who is a close partner to WILPF. We are very delighted to be working closely with Rasha. So Rasha, I'll give you the floor now.
Thank you. Hello everyone. So as Sarah mentioned, we conducted a number of consultations in partnership with organizations who are at the local level in Yemen. We selected 3 governorates in Yemen, Sana'a, Taiz, and Aden. Aden is the capital. And we selected these 3 governorates because they have different conflict dynamics. And so we wanted to have a gender perspective and analysis on challenges that women face in these 3 different dynamics governorates. So in Aden, for example, it is a liberated city since a year ago. It still have a number of security challenges. In Taiz, it is an ongoing conflict zone where armed groups are in clashes on daily basis. It's a governorate that is under siege for more than 19-20 months. And Sana'a, it's under Saudi-led coalition airstrikes and bombardment for the last 2 years. The consultation were happening with women who are internally displaced, women who are political leaders, women at the front lines who are working in civil society organizations, and women working at the security sector. But before I tell you the findings, I want to share with you in general what is the status of women in Yemen and what is happening. Because of this devastating war, the the humanitarian situation, which is a protracted crisis that was even before the war existed, it has magnified very severely. Now we have more than 18 million people who are in dire need. We have people, around 7 million, who are at risk of famine. We have people who are dying from hunger, children and women. We also, we also have a lot of people who are internally displaced, around 3 million, who lack the basic needs, and living in tree shacks and no assistance. We have also, sorry, oops, how can I go back? Yeah, sorry. So in general, there is an increased burden on women. Women, for example, in Taiz, in certain areas where there is siege, they have to walk for hours and hours just to get some assistance for their families, including food, medicines. They walk in very difficult areas. We'll have women who are losing their breadwinners, who are now becoming, assuming new gender roles. They have to provide an income for their families. And we have, the services in general have collapsed. The education system is collapsing, especially in Taiz. The health services, we have more than 500,000 pregnant women who cannot access proper health services, and we have a lot of increased rate of mortality during delivery. So this is a quick snapshot to tell you that the women are the victims of this war. They are being targeted, whether by airstrikes, whether by snipes, whether by indiscriminate shelling. But they are also being exploited to be part of this war. They are being recruited in armed militia, and we see them parading. And they have been also used to disperse, for example, peaceful protests. So there is also an increased role for women in terms of carrying arms. But regardless of a woman being a victim or a woman being exploited to be a fighter, women are also assuming new roles in women, peace and security. Especially at the community level, we found that women are at the front lines, addressing issues of relief, for facilitating convoys in areas where it was difficult for humanitarian assistance to go. They managed to mediate and negotiate and get relief into very difficult areas. We saw them at the front line addressing child recruitment. A third of the fighters in Yemen are children. The first women who responded to this crisis were women-led organizations. They provided disarmament, demobilization, reintegration programs. We saw the women taking a leading role in addressing and countering violent extremism and preventing violent extremism, doing awareness sessions, talking about early warning signs, writing about radicalization. We are seeing women supporting security efforts. So for example, for Taiz, women are playing a role, meeting with army leaders, meeting with the government, meeting with the president, talking about how to develop a security plan at the local level in Taiz. We also So women organize themselves to play a role in releasing the detainees and prisoners and war prisoners. They have formed an alliance. For example, what they do is they collect information about the detainees. They track them. They try to track them where they are. They try to inform the families of these detainees of their whereabouts and provide them with information. They help them report this to ICRC. So there is an organized work by women to address this very sensitive and critical file. Women are also playing a role in reviving the economy. For example, this is a picture of an organization called SMEPS in Yemen, who are supporting women like Nujud to revive the economy through this is an agriculture project. We have women in Taiz, for example, who are producing coffee beans at this in a conflict zone and sending it for export to sell it with the support of local NGOs. So all of these brilliant examples are just telling you how women have adopted and the resilience of women, how it is in Yemen is a good example. This is an example of the abductees of Mothers Association that I told you about. This is this picture explains how they burned. This is a woman where they cover. It's called sitara in Yemen, and they cut their hair and they burned it. This is in Yemen traditions and customs is a call for women to respect themselves or to have ethics, to address their needs and release the detainees. So they are using tribal code to motivate this positive actions. In Taiz, this is another example, which is the Women for Peace Association as well. This is the example from the supporting the peace. So to summarize as well, I wanted to give you a snapshot about women participation in politics and peace negotiation. So we had a transitional period in Yemen in 2000, starting after the uprising. We had the process of National Dialogue Conference where women managed to have a 30% representation or quota for women. Women made 28%. They managed, in the outcomes, they managed to have that quota in the outcomes of the conference. They managed also to have it in the draft constitution that was drafted. The UN Security Council Resolution 2216 was very gender blind. It didn't mention women participation explicitly. It was very modest how they addressed women participation, but they still refer to the NDC outcomes and the GCC mechanism. In the NDC, women took a leading role. They were heading 3 out of the 9 teams, and in the other teams, they were either moderating, so they were at the high level of the managing committees. For the peace agreements that happened during the last few years, and the mediation efforts. Before the war erupts, there was a mediation committee that was formed. There was a woman participating in that. And the GCC, after the uprising, when they signed the agreement for the GCC, which is the Gulf Cooperation Council, sponsored peace agreement in 2011 after the uprising, there was only 1 woman. In 2014, when there was tension, they signed another agreement, but in that agreement there were no women at all represented, and right after the war broke. I have a question for you that I want you to help me answer. Sarah is helping me.
Yes, so I will launch a poll now, and then you will be able to
participate with us and give us your ideas. So the question is, how many women you think now at the current talks, how many women out of 26 members were involved in the Yemeni peace negotiations in the 3rd round of peace talks? These talks were held last year in April. It was in Kuwait. So tell me, what do you think was the participation of women? Were they 15 women, 7 women, or 3 women? Please try to select your answer and click on it.
So I think
can you
everyone, yes, I think everyone has, all the attendees almost have answered. We have 15 people who answered 5%, which is the majority, and then
5% answered 15.
Yes, 5% answered 15, 20% answered 7, and 75% of the participants answered 3.
And that's accurate. 3 women only were present at the negotiation. These women represented the warring parties, the delegates, and there was no independent voice of women. So in track 1 negotiations, this the formal space where the negotiation is happening at for the peace. We only have 3 out of 26. There was one woman part of an advisory team for the Hadi delegate. There were also, when they formed the de-escalation committees, these are the committees that are monitoring the ceasefires, there was 0 women, although we know that the UN Envoy Office have received a list of women who are working in the security sector, who they can be appointed. There is 0 participation during shuttle diplomacy. Shuttle diplomacy is basically what is happening right now when the UN envoy goes back and forth between the warring parties. Okay, track 2, the UN women have sponsored a group of women called the Yemeni Women Pact for Peace and Security. This is a pact having a lot of women from different backgrounds, political, business women, journalists, civil society representatives, coming together to support peace. They focus on the participation of women in negotiations, and that's one of the efforts that is happening, but it is supporting track 2 initiative, not track 1 so far. 7 women leaders, including myself, were invited at the 3rd round of talks at the sidelines to meet with the ambassadors who are sponsoring the peace, to meet with the warring parties. So these are so far the efforts that were made to include women, but we are thinking they are very modest to our aspirations. We are often told that women, when we ask why women are not at the peace table, these are the excuses we hear. They tell us that no one is willing to risk upsetting the warring parties, and they tell us that women are not qualified. Of course, I have shown you in the first part of this presentation that women are more than qualified to be at peace table. The first one is about upsetting the warring parties. This is really ridiculous, because we had the UN was supporting us to be present at the national dialogue. We think the UN has to play a much harder role to push for having women at the peace table, because what are you going to lose if you don't involve women? Are the warring parties going to be upset and kill each other more? They are already doing that. The women also mobilized themselves to draft a women and peace and security agenda. This was presented to, this is an event of, an initiative that women led to try to draft this agenda. This is being validated now at the local level by different women groups. These are the recommendations of the women from the consultations that we did. The women want ceasefires to hold. They want no-fly zones over highly populated residential areas. They want lifting the siege imposed internally on governorates. They want ensuring humanitarian corridors. They want to open the airport of Sana'a, for example. They want to revive the judiciary system in the areas that are liberated, at least. They want support with women efforts who are working on countering violent extremism and preventing violent extremism. They want inclusion, no less than 30%. If more, that's great. And they want to bring victims to the table as well. They want the issue of self-determination for South to be in the peace. As you know, this is the big elephant of the room. It hasn't been addressed appropriately in this peace negotiations. The Southerners have been calling for self-determination since 2007, and until now, their agenda is not, their issue is not present at the peace agenda, and there is no delegate representing the South in the peace process. They want DDR programs targeting women and children to start immediately. DDR programs are disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration programs. The humanitarian plan says that they suspend this programs because they are waiting for a political settlement and it is too risky, but we are saying no, you need to start these programs immediately because women's rights and children's rights should not be part of a political settlement discussion. We want withdrawal of militants from governorates, removal of armed depots, camps from highly populated cities, women inclusion in the security sector, supporting the local efforts of women. We want support the relief and humanitarian response plan to be inclusive, especially women voices have to be there. We want to prioritize economic empowerment and income generation interventions rather than giving dignity kits that continue to do the humanitarian response is focusing on short-sighted remedies, but we want them to have more sustainability. This is a protracted crisis, have been there for years. It's now time to be proactive and to be more sustainable. We want IDPs to have shelters, income generation. We want to establish an internal, this is a call that we have been repeating since we were in Kuwait last year. We want an international fund for reconstruction of Yemen. It has to be announced, it has to happen now. We want reparation programs to start, and we want to improve access to information, especially women access to information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rasha, for this very insightful elaboration on the situation of women, on the voices that, the concerns that they would like to voice, and on the status of women, peace, and security in Yemen. I would like to move now to Lina, who is also a Yemeni activist and the chairperson of AKUN or TOBE Foundation for Rights and Freedoms. Lina, I'll give you the floor. So, Lina, I can briefly translate her presentation to English.
نحن كمنظمة نتكلم عن كمنظمة عملت متواجدة في الميدان في الأرض. كانت النقاط هي ملاحظة في الأرض هي عن انسحاب المنظمات الدولية من الجنوب. الجنوب هي تعتبر منطقة محررة من سيطرة الميليشيات وتخضع للحكومة أو للسلطة الشرعية، لكن الشيء الغريب انسحاب المنظمات الدولية من هذه المناطق المحررة.
Okay, so Lina was saying that the first thing they noticed is that the international NGOs withdrew from the areas that were liberated, and that affected the work of national NGOs.
أيضا هناك توتر في العلاقات ما بين المنظمات في الشمال والمنظمات في الجنوب. فقط تعليق تعريف أنه المنظمات الجنوبية تعتبر في الأراضي خاضعة للدولة وتحت سيطرة الحكومة الشرعية، بينما المنظمات في الشمال هي تحت سيطرة الميليشيات، وهذا سبب علاقة متوترة في التعامل، لا يستطيعون العمل كشراكة أو حتى تبادل المعلومات أو حتى حضور المؤتمرات والتدريبات معا.
There is a tension between the south and north dynamics in terms of the NGOs, the national NGOs have tension between working with each other. They cannot work with each other like before because of this tension and this conflict dynamic. They are worried about sharing information. So the NGOs working in the south and the NGOs working on the north hesitate to share information, hesitate to work together because of this conflict dynamic. Even and when they are invited to conferences or workshops, they are hesitant to attend
من خلال مرحلة الحرب ما بعدها لاحظنا أنه تغير مجال الاهتمام إلى الإغاثة. جميع المنظمات، أغلب المنظمات وقفت عملها. المنظمات الدولية لم تعد تدعم أي مشاريع أخرى باستثناء مشاريع الإغاثة، وإن جاءت مشاريع الإغاثة متأخرة. توقفت المنظمات المحلية، توقفت المجالات الأخرى في العمل مع المنظمات المحلية. أصبح العمل مقتصر فقط على أعمال الإغاثة الإنسانية.
The national NGOs generally have their mandate have shifted to humanitarian. Anything else or any other field stopped almost completely, and they just focused on humanitarian.
المشكلة الرئيسية هي الآن عدم القدرة على تقديم العون القانوني بسبب توقف المنظومة القضائية. على سبيل المثال أبسط الأمور أن النساء لا تستطيع الذهاب إلى المحكمة، لا تستطيع تقديم أي شكوى، القضاء متوقف ومتعطل.
Another challenge that the national NGOs are facing, for example in the south, is that they cannot provide legal aid because the judiciary system is frozen. The simplest legal assistance that women need, for example, to register a marriage or to have a divorce, they cannot do it because the judiciary system is frozen.
أصبحت عمل المنظمات مقيدة جدا. مثلا في الشمال التي خاضعة لسيطرة الميليشيات يتطلب العمل تصاريح إضافية، تتطلب أن تطلب تصريح من وزارة التخطيط. مثلا إذا لدينا فعالية محددة في إحدى المدارس ربما نحتاج إلى شهر أو أكثر لطلب هذا التصريح الإضافي، وأحيانا يتم الرفض ولا يرد على هذا الطلب.
The national NGOs in the north reported that they require licenses from Ministry of Planning for the simplest activities, such as even if you want to schedule a school visit, you need to do that, and it takes around a month, and it might come a rejection, it might be rejected. So their space is shrinking.
عدم القدرة على توثيق الانتهاكات ضد النساء في الشمال أو في الجنوب. أولاً عدم قدرة المنظمات على التحرك من الشمال إلى الجنوب بسهولة وتقييد حركتهم. ثانياً في مجتمع محافظ أيضاً نحن كاليمن كثيراً من الانتهاكات وخاصة العنف الجنسي ضد النساء والانتهاكات الجنسية لا يستطيعون التحدث بها أو توثيقها.
The national NGOs are also facing a problem in reporting and documenting sexual and gender-based violence cases because and they receive even threats because of the social stigma, because of the not understanding of this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lina and Rasha, for this very important overview. We will now move to Libya with our distinguished speaker, Miloud. She is a Libyan activist and she works with the WILPF partner organization in Libya called معا نبنيها, or Together We Build It organization. Inas, I give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks for my colleagues, Rasha and Lina, for their great presentation and their explanation about the situation of women in Yemen. I would like first to start by say a little about Together We Build It. Our organization have been founded in 2011 since the revolution and the war started in Libya. We've been focusing in youth and women's empowerment during the democratic transition. We are also the leader organization of 1325 network in Libya. 1325 network was co-founded by more than 30 members, organizations, and independent activists to raise awareness about the resolution 1325, but also to monitor the implementation of the same resolution. We've released our first monitoring report, and it's the first monitoring report in Libya that was included in the worldwide report on 1325 resolution. Our mandate also objectives is also to advocate for national action plan for the resolution. However, because of the situation in Libya, we try to create other mechanism of how to tackle 1325, but also women, peace, and security issues. So most recently, we started this study or the consultation among Libyan women to address the women, peace, and security, and also to tackle the issue of their lack of a presence during the current Libyan process. Our aim or the objectives of this consultation is to conduct consultation with Libyan women with different and diverse voices in different locations and different ethnic groups. Also to identify the peace and security priorities. We've noticed that within the UN peace agreement, there is a really huge vacuum of gendered peace priorities, or sensitive gendered peace, or lack of including women's needs. The third objective is to identify entry points of women's peace and security. So what are the entry points or the key needs of women within Libyan society, to advocate and develop action. So hopefully after now we've finished the consultation, we wanted to create a platform of where we can create action for these objectives or these needs of women in Libya. So I wanted to give you a little information about how the consultation happened in Libya. So we've consulted more than 50 women in different parts of Libya, in the west and south, in Sabha, Tripoli, and in Yemen. Our target groups were women activists, displaced women, grassroots women, women negotiators. It was important for us to include all women from different walks of life. So we had teachers, we had women who never finished their education, but we also have women educated who had college diplomas and master's degrees. Also, we made sure to include a group of women from different ages, and from 40 years old, 45 years old to 18 years old and 20 years old. Also, we included women from different ethnic backgrounds. So we have Amazigh and Arabs, and this is so important for us to include all the voices. We include also women negotiators who were involved in the Libyan peace process, either with their own organizations and also or as a part of the conflict in Libya. So you can see here the Libyan map, where the study took place in Tripoli and in 2 sites in Tripoli and Afusa Mountains, and also in the south in Sabha. Excuse me. So the key findings, the main key findings of the study or of these consultation was armed violence. Women were saying, the majority of women when consulted were saying that they are the victim threat and they are the target of the armed violence going on in the communities, the different malicious groups that are threatening their freedom of movement, threatening their way of life, either work or other basic daily activities. Malicious groups in Libya are everywhere, and they're specifically target the vulnerable groups, either in displaced camps, the displaced communities, but also women and other vulnerable groups. Women also been reporting about structural constraints, such as the liquidity issue in Libya. So Libyan women or Libyan families who are dependent completely on this money and dependent completely in working with the government. They don't receive any salaries or payments due to the liquidity issue, and the money that is not, the money are lacking in Libya. And also the long power cuts happening, more than 8 hours power cuts a day, war shortage in the suburbs and rural areas, but also in the capital, either in Benghazi and Tripoli. The people are lacking. Women, children in particular, are affected by that, lacking the basics means of life. Freedom of movement. The majority of the women, the consulted women, saying that they are afraid, are scared to move around their communities and around cities. Most of them, they said that they cannot move alone to other cities in Libya, so they have really limited movement within their communities, but no really movement at all to other cities or other towns in Libya and villages. There's also a report from these women that they lack freedom of movement nationally and internationally as well, due to many extremists, the rise of extremist groups and militia that are limiting women's movement, in particular women peace activists. We can recall the recent resolution that was adopted by the Eastern unrecognized government that saying that we will limit, we will actually forbid women's traveling alone without muhram or male companion, male relative companion. But that, of course, because of the work of the great women's activists in the East, that resolution being taken but replaced with other resolution or article saying that women cannot move unless or women and men cannot move unless they have security clearances. But what really security clearances means for these women is unknown. So there's a huge concern for women in Libya regarding their freedom of movement. Lack of access to information. We've asked this question to most of the women consulted about what they know about the Libyan political process or the Libyan political agreement. The majority of them said that they don't really know anything about the current Libyan political process. They weren't invited. They weren't called. Even the women activists who knew about the process, they weren't called. They weren't invited or consulted about their concerns. But if one of them said, if there is a Libyan political agreement, we don't see its results in the ground. So there is really no information, also no implementation for anything regarding the Libyan political agreement. Exclusion of women in the current Libyan process. As you may know, in Libya, there are several Libyan peace talks that have taken place either in Skhirat in Morocco or Geneva or Malta. The number of women are very few. One of the first Geneva talks has only 2 women, and none of them are actually negotiators. In Morocco, the number of women increased. However, very, very few women were at a negotiating table. And women were reporting that their exclusion wasn't random an action, but it was very, very intentional. So this is a really huge concern that women really a huge concern that women were mentioning the exclusion of politics, that UN agencies and UN-led peace process being committing against women in Libya, and that is for sure, this is the cause of the lack of women's participation, the full and effective and equal women's participation within the Libyan peace process. This is a picture. This is the consultation took place in different, in the diverse locations in Libya. But I wanted to end up my presentation with a recommendation that we finalized. We finalized our consultation of call for an immediate end to the use of explosive weapons in populated areas, including aerial bombardment. Armed attacks are depending in the misery of civilians, who are the overwhelming majorities of casualties. Stop directing financial aid vitally needed for humanitarian actions to military and operation intended to enter or control ISIS. And we see that evident in Libya recent strikes, airstrikes, an increased militarized environment, starting funding long-term development and start funding long-term development interventions. Continue the UN embargo on the weapon sales to Libya, and sanctions, an urgent call for sanctions for countries who are violating the UN embargo, an urgent call for an inclusive, a full, effective, and equal women's participation during the Libyan women's peace, the Libyan peace process. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ines, for this very important overview on the consultations that you've conducted across different parts of Libya. I would like now to move to open the floor for questions for our speakers. So I'll mention again that you will be able to see this small icon of a hand, and I would like to kindly ask you to press that icon if you have any question for any of our speakers. Does anyone have a question? So I have a couple already. I have Anna. So I will unmute Anna now, and you can ask your question. Anna?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay, great. Yes, I just want to thanks for a very interesting webinar. And I have a question about Yemen. I was wondering, for this study, if you included women from different sides of the conflict, and also if you could tell a little bit more about how you practically was able to do this kind of study in Yemen right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I would like to encourage others to ask their questions. This way we can group the questions, and then our speakers can answer maybe a set of 3 together or a set of 2. You can also type your question in case you would not like to speak. Anyone else? Okay, so I will, we have a question from Sylvia. I will unmute Sylvia now. Sylvia, you are unmuted, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Okay, hello. Thank you very much for this webinar, and also thank you very much for the introduction about Yemen, situation in Yemen and also in Libya. And I have a question to Ines. I'm working for Amica, it's a German NGO, and we're working in Libya since 2012 with 2 organizations in Tripoli and 1 in Benghazi. And I have a question, Ines, according to this kind of support you need, like from outside, like from kind of organizations like Amica, because it's very difficult to get access to Libya now. We cannot travel there, and also according to the liquidity crisis, it's very difficult to support activists and NGOs. And what kind of support you're expecting or need from the outside? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. We have another question that I will take and then give the floor to our speakers, and then maybe we can do another round of questions. So I can see that Daniel has a hand raised. I'm gonna unmute Daniel. Hello?
Hello.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi. I was wondering how the issue, thank you by the way, thank you everybody, how the issue of the arms trade issue as a cause is being addressed and counter-lobbied, US and UK, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Okay, so I will give the floor to our speakers from Yemen and then move to Ines.
So the first question was about the methodology. For Yemen, there was a consortium of NGOs we had one NGO, in each governorate, we had one NGO conduct these consultations. The selection of respondents were made based on a criteria for each. So for the IDPs, we tried to have IDPs from different places. In Sana'a, the IDPs included IDPs coming from Taiz and IDPs coming from Saada. Similarly, political leaders, so we tried as much as possible to have views from all the spectrum, and not necessarily group everybody in one room, but have different meetings to collect the different views. This is the same in Taiz and the same in Aden. The second question was about the arms trade. We keep saying this in all the meetings, and we try to meet with the countries who are main exporters to Saudi Arabia, and we call for the stop of arms transfer and to respect the ATT. To respect the ATT, the Arms Trade Treaty. We need a lot of your support from your end. We used to think that those countries who are having, and to some extent, good respect to human rights are our allies. But now we increasingly are disappointed to see that there is no seriousness in addressing and having peace in our countries. It feels like business. It feels they're making money out of Yemeni blood. At the same time, their contribution to humanitarian and reconstruction is not serious. So we need everybody to help us. We need the citizens of those countries to help us as well. And we need to raise our voices.
Thank you very much, Rasha. I hope that this answered Anna's and Daniel's question. I will now give the floor to Inas to respond to Sylvia's question and also address Daniel's if needed. Please go ahead, Inas.
Hello, everyone again. Thank you, Sylvia, for your question. And regarding the support that we would like to receive from the international organization working with women NGOs or local NGOs, I think for a start, I would like this organization to celebrate the local women's initiatives, to advocate with them and lobby with them on their causes, because I see that there are a lot of local initiatives from organizations that are invisible and they're not in the center of attention. So there are, for instance, such consultations that we conducted in Libya. I'm not aware of, and actually there isn't any consultation. It's the first time such a consultation happening in Libya with international organization. But I know that there are many local initiatives like ours. However, they are not, they are ignored. The second thing, I think, technical support. I know that many women international organizations are asked to do capacity buildings, workshops, and trainings, and they are very important. But it's also important to incorporate the Libyan civil society organization skills, also because we have skills and they need to incorporate it within these technical programs. So more of this, but also incorporate the experience of local NGOs. I would also recommend more sustainable projects. In Libya, most of the projects are 3 months long projects, very short. And the impact of these projects are very little. So more increase the period of these projects for 1 year to 3 years. We've been hearing about how the organizations are not really effective, and Libyan civil society are very weak or very young. But also this is because of the fact that Libyan civil society are being unpaid and doing most of the work voluntarily. So this is an important factor, and I think working with not consultancy or organization, but rather with strong feminist women's organization, not you know to develop develop action in the communities. Yeah, so, and regarding the liquidity issues, I think the international community or the international organization should be flexible. So you have to find ways and mechanisms to how to support financially the women's organization, local women's organization in Libya. And I think with WILPF and our recent projects we created, they were so flexible in that regard, in understanding to how to finance our project. So maybe you should talk about like how we did it in WILPF, like how, like because some organization kind of forbid to finance us through not in Libya in particular, but actually to allow us to open a bank account for our organization outside Libya so we can receive money.
Yeah, it's been extremely challenging for us to do that, but as Ina said, we are extremely keen on supporting projects like these, especially that there are no other sources of support to conduct projects such as consultations or any others related to women, peace and security, and to voice the concerns of women. It took a lot of months for us to send you the funds. It was impossible to do that through Libya. Even through agencies such as Western Union, it's also impossible, not only for the liquidity problem, but also if we were told that even if someone went to withdraw money that was sent to them through Western Union, they would be put in a very insecure situation since they could be targeted by armed militias or any other uncontrolled groups, thinking that these people do have a lot of money and this is why they're going in to withdraw them. So at the end, we had to send the money to someone from the Together We Build It organization to their bank account in Tunisia, and that person had to go to Tunisia to withdraw the money and come back to Libya to finance the project. So it's been extremely challenging and time consuming, but we can definitely say that it's worth all the time and the challenges.
And also, I think some organization do like cash, but I'm not sure how is this possible for other organization. But I think we definitely as we did it with WILPF, and I think other organization can do it too.
Yes, thank you. I would just like to give the floor again to Rasha very quickly, and then I'll take a question from Sana and Blanca.
I just wanted to mention something very important that I forgot to mention for the first question. The three NGOs did not interact with each other because of security issues. We had to have someone outside the country to collect the information. They refused to interact with each other because, especially the one in Aden and the one in Sana'a. To share information or anything because of the security risk, because of the dynamics, the conflict dynamics, south and north dynamics. So we had a person coordinating outside the country, collecting or receiving the data collection and the analysis done outside the country, but the collection of the data was inside by the three separate NGOs.
Thank you, Rasha. So I would like to give the floor to Sana. Sana, I will unmute you and then I will read Blanca's question. Sana, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you everyone so much for the very, very interesting and useful insights. I have several questions, but I'll try and just ask one. I actually wanted to hear more about the consultations carried out in Libya, and precisely how they were carried out to ensure that they were inclusive and representative of as Ina said, all sort of women from all backgrounds, and especially keeping in mind the challenges relating to travel and security that were mentioned. And then if I could add a follow-up question as well, which would be how would you see the best way forward to ensure women's participation in the peace process in Libya, and keeping in mind again, especially also the participation of younger women? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sana. Before giving the floor to our speakers, I will read the question from Blanca. Blanca wrote a question saying that women and children are being used in military conflicts, and this question is directed to Yemen. So do you, she's asking, are they given extra comfort for their input, or are they forced to perform in liaison with the militants? So Blanca, I strongly, yes, we would really like you to elaborate if you don't have a problem. So I will unmute you now. Blanca? Hello, Blanca? Blanca, you are unmuted. Okay, maybe we can, I can give the floor to Inas to respond to Sana's question, and then we can try again with Blanca. Blanca, you please feel free to write on the space given to you whenever you're ready to ask the question.
So for the accessing women, so together we build it, or Ma'ana Miha as an organization was co-founded since 2011. So we've been here 6 years now, and thankfully we have really great relationships with women in different parts of Libya. But how did we choose, or how did we selected our target group? It is very much like, for instance, with the displaced people, with displaced women target group, we went to the management. So I myself worked with displaced communities before, so it was very easy for me to communicate with them and ask them if they're willing to be part of our consultation group. So until of them get the message from the management, and they choose to be part of our organization, part of the consultation. And of course, we wanted to make sure that these women were diverse, either in their backgrounds, but also in age groups. So we've received more than 10 requests, and then we selected the specific target group, or the specific participants according to their ages and their different backgrounds. So we wanted, and also not only backgrounds, but also the days that they were displaced. Are they new to this camp or not new to this camp? So we also paid attention to that. So we're always hearing like it's very difficult to access women, but it's really not. For instance, like for our second target group, to make sure to be exposed to women who never been to consultations, who never been to workshops, who never been to any events related to Libya. There's this kind of idea that my aunt called me and she told me, okay, Inas, there's this baby shower. And I've talked to the women. I've talked to the women in the baby shower, and they're actually very glad to receive you for your focus group or for your consultation focus group. And then these women were my aunt's neighbor in Tripoli, so in suburbs Tripoli, and I knew that. I did not know them directly, but I knew that they had different also backgrounds, different ages. One of them were 18, who just married, who did not finish school, and one of them was like 75, who's the oldest actually participant we had. And we're 7 of them, and they were really happy to share their inputs and to discuss opinions about Libya and Libya's future. So I think we succeeded to find creative ways, such as baby powers and events and communal events. Like in Yifrin, we went to a communal event and we've announced our consultation and who wanted to be part of it. And of course, again, we selected the participants according to the geographical and their diverse background. And your second question, sorry, I forgot her second point. What are recommendations for the women's participation? First, we've noticed a very systematic exclusion of women within very systematic exclusion of women throughout the Libyan process and not only the Libyan process, but the Libyan political process or peace process, but even before 2014. And this is due to the UN policies. So I think one of it is actually to bring UN special envoy who is feminist, who actually thinks of women's agenda as priority in the center of the current situation. And second, of course, advocate more and listen to women more and access women more, just like what we did. So I'm sorry.
Thank you very, very much, Inas, and I hope that answers the question. I will now give the floor to Rasha to answer Blanca's question. Please, Rasha, you have the floor.
So the question is saying whether there are referring to the picture of the male child carrying the rifle, and if that's happening also for girls or female children. There are pictures that we find, especially during, like, there was a parade of women, like an armed parade of women carrying arms. Among them, there was girls carrying rifles. So they are carrying, but there is no evidence that they are being used to fight so far. But for male children, they are recruited and they are fighting, and they actually are around a third of the fighters are younger than 18 boys. So this is very alarming, because now they are moving towards recruiting women and girls, and I expect, because the UN did not take any serious steps. They didn't put, for example, child recruitment at the heart of the peace agenda to be addressed, although it is part of the UN Security Council Resolution 2216. It was addressed in a shy way under the detainees file. They said we will prioritize releasing the children, but that's not the same like ending child recruitment as the resolution calls for. So we want more serious action towards that, especially that they are now considering women and girls. For the consultations, just to confirm what my colleague is saying here, you have to understand that this is local NGOs leading consultations. They don't have the capacity of international organizations or UN agencies. We have to criticize and ask about these questions, direct them to the UN facilitated consultation processes that we don't have any information about, that they are not inclusive, and that so I would encourage you to direct that question as well to the UN facilitated process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rasha and Inas, for your elaborated answers. I don't see any hands raised. We can take one final question if anyone would like to ask anything. Otherwise, we will close the webinar session. Are there any questions from the attendees? So before I close, Inas will take a couple of seconds to quickly add a final point.
And just really going back to the point of increasing women's participation, in our consultation, we know for sure that there are women participating in negotiation in the local level, women who are advocating for peace. So we should celebrate these efforts and bring them and celebrate them. So could you expand more? So this is a question from, or could you explain more of a systematic nature of the exclusion in the Libyan process? So if you noticed the Libyan peace talks, you would know that number of women are very, very little, like only 2 women or 3 women in each of these peace talks. So why? So this is the question. There is no really explanation for that, and I see it as systematic because I see this happening. This is not the first time that UN-led projects or UN-led anything in Libya is excluding women. We've seen this with the other UNSMIL leadership, that they were really not bringing women in discussing disarmament, in discussing the current transitional period, in discussing election, in discussing constitution, and now in the Libyan process. So this is what I mean. It's a systematic, because I don't think this is something random.
Thank you very much, Ines, for responding to Kavita's question. I would like to close this webinar session. Thank you so much for all the attendees who remained with us until the end. I would like to inform you that the webinar will soon be online, and we will send an email with the link to the webinar to everyone who attended this session. We also strongly encourage you to subscribe to our news and alerts to get information on upcoming webinars, and to also subscribe to our newsletter to receive updates on our activities. Thank you very much again.